Yay! We're back with another episode of Black.Queer.Alive, and I'm here with Brandon Logans. Hi, Brandon.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me. I actually wanted to get you in like on the first set of interviews that I had. But it got filled up so quick, and I was like, I'll catch Brandon on the flip side. Like, well, I'll get you in eventually. So I'm glad that you were able to do it.
Oh, that's very sweet. I'm very excited to be here.
Um, uh, for some background, you and I met at Mills College. You were in your second year of the program. I was in the first year, and we had theories and strategies class together.
Yeah, the teaching one.
I have a little confession. When I walked in and I saw you, I was like, "Whoa, he is so cute." I was like,
I'm
"Oh."
gonna get shy.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I was like, "Oh." And then I met you, and I was like, oh, "Okay, cool, cool. Brandon is cool as shit." Like,
Oh, that's so sweet.
can you tell
I
us?
just remember that class. I just remember that class, me being very like, all right, well, this is what we're gonna do.
Just be like, "I'm here. I'm here. All
Yep.
right, just going to work."
Believe that.
um, yeah, I have this. I have like a. I think people kind of misread me when they first meet me. They're like, "Is this bitch mean? Is this bitch like, what's going on?"
Oh,
But I open up over time. Uh,
my memory of that class was just like, oh, you say some really smart things. Like that's that's like my memory of you, not like, oh, you're mean. It was like very like, ooh, okay, all right, I feel it, you
thank
know.
you. Thank you for that. I thought, yeah, I thought you were cute. That was my thing. Let's jump into it. What's your name is Brandon Logan, but what's your age? What are you passionate about? And what are your pronouns?
So I am 29. I uh my passion is like poetry, you know. I also love anime. That is definitely a subset of passions. But in terms of like creative things I do is poetry. And then my pronouns are like I usually use he, him. I don't mind they, them, but they feel I have like less formed opinions about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your poet? Well, let me before I go into that question. Sorry.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable, how do you sexually identify?
Yeah. So sexually identify just a gay guy, I guess. it's it's one of those weird things actually where like I feel like I'm more attracted to masculinity, and so masculinity I think can be in a lot of different bodies, and so it's not really about it's not really about like men specifically. I have definitely had some studs where I was like, oh God, wow, like just take me away. But yeah, I feel like what I've most lived my life is that.
Okay. Um, Tell me about your poetry. I think you're one of the most sensual readers that I have ever heard, and that's very exciting. So, can you tell us about what motivates your work?
Um, so it's interesting. I feel like my poetry, I like want to prioritize like two things. One of them is I feel like poetry is a place for non-rational ways of understanding. And
Mm,
so I feel like, it prioritizes emotional understandings more. And that's like what I really want to hold true. And so sometimes um, I might my work might feel like a little bit at a distance in what it's trying to say, but that's because my priority is kind of like let's have your body like experience something, like let's have you feel something, and then like what comes out of that.
mm,
Um, and then with that, I really think that poetry is one of those places that allows for kind of deep reflection of yourself and like a moment to have like kind of deep intimacy with yourself. And so those two things are like very important to me. It's kind of this like emotional way of like knowing that I feel like isn't emphasized. Um, and then also this kind of like opportunity to deeply reflect on yourself in a way where you can like move through grief or move through like love in ways that aren't rational, you know, that aren't like it was because of X, Y, and Z. There, it's because of like I was moved this way, you know, and now I'm crying and I needed to cry and like that feels great, you know. So those are like the two I think like big core sentiments that I try to like continuously like do.
It's so interesting. I've been told that I write cerebrally, it like more so in the head. So it
Yeah.
is refreshing to hear work like yours that really feels like it comes from the heart. It's nice. Um, where do you find home?
Um, Gosh, I know you just gave the questions before and I like try to think about them. And this was like a hard one for me.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like my answer normally is that I find home in like people, you know, and like friends. I find like a deep sense of connection with like my friends. And so those are the places that I feel like most home generally. Um, I've been trying to think about home more as like my body
Mm.
more now, um, and trying to have a better relationship with my body as like a place of home. But I'm not there yet, and so like I'm still kind of like with my friends, you know, as like spaces of home, um, which I think is like you know it's just because of how much I value kind of my friendships and my relationships. Um, yeah, so
What made you start that transition from thinking of home as more of being with people and now more so concentrated in the body?
um, it was actually I was like we might talk a lot about my work, I guess. I when I wrote my thesis, it was kind of this bleak point of view on like the state of things. I guess I was kind of like really invested in kind of like how power like maintains itself. And so one of the things in the thesis is it doesn't really imagine the future. And so I started to kind of ask myself these series of questions of like, what does it mean to build home? Can you build a home if the future has no place for you?
Mm.
And then um, like what does that mean if your home is supposed to be your body? And so I think that series of questions is what made me think about, you know, this body as a home, as like a way and envisioning like a place for myself in the future. But then if I don't have like a good relationship with my body or like my body as home, then like can I imagine these kind of like utopias for myself or for others, right? The people who are really like dear to me. So
What does utopia mean to you?
uh, I'm like I'm trying to I'm trying to figure it out because I think well that's not true. Um, you know, there's this like dreamscape place where like black people thrive and we like live and like that place where we thrive and where we live like there's all these you know transformative ways in which we relate to each other, you know, where intimacy is kind of like valued very greatly, where emotional maturity is valued very greatly, like kind of all those kinds of impulses I imagine in utopia, you know. um and I imagine like kind of like these kind of great like not I don't know. I feel like my perspective sometimes is very like one to one, but I also feel like that is very important to utopia. You know, I feel like it's a piece of everyone kind of having their visions together, right? What are like ways in which I allow myself and others to dream healthily that we then like thrive together? And there's like something along those steps to that that's utopic to me.
That builds towards that dream space.
Yeah, yeah. Which that dream space can be like, you know, lived in us like being joyful, lived in us by being in grief, like lived in us by being in every state of our existence just by like being. Um, yeah.
I feel that. I feel that. What are you searching for?
Um, what I it's weird. I don't know right now. I'm gonna yeah, I don't know right now. I think that like currently what I've been kind of focused on is more just like self-reflection stuff, more just like things about trying to like incorporate and like feel through pains and anxieties that I've had. That
Mhm.
isn't really, that might be like searching for myself on some level again, like taking time to search for new sides of myself again. But yeah, there's not like this, like, it feels, there's a part of it that feels so current and now that it doesn't feel future, you know? It doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like lost or to me. Like I don't feel any, yeah, I don't know.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Are there any mm, like where do you see yourself when you look out into the world? And that could be like in media, in books, in television, in stories.
Oh yeah, this this is yeah, I okay. So I feel like when I saw Spider-Verse,
Oh,
so
okay.
this was very specific. I like was watching it and I have this distinct memory of being like, that's my nose. And I've like never seen my or like there was like this moment of like, that's my nose. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like this character, like I could see myself in this character in certain ways, like feature wise, where
Mhm.
like sometimes I feel like in animation, like those features don't come through.
They don't translate.
Yeah, yeah. And there was this moment of like just like, oh, this is really nice. Um, I was thinking about it before and actually wrote about this recently, but I don't know if you know My So-Called Life.
I've heard of that, but I've never watched it.
So my mom was really into My So-Called Life, and um, this like young, you know, very queer boy
Mhm.
in it, and his name's Ricky. And I feel like that was like one of like the other times where I was like, am I like Ricky? Like, why am I gravitating towards Ricky? And like this like feeling of like, interesting. Um, yeah, but I don't. Those are like kind of two like clear moments. But I think it's a question I like sometimes struggle with, to be honest.
Who is I like that idea of watching a movie and being like, that's my nose. Like that's something that you think is important until you actually see it and you go, whoa, like this can happen in in representation, you know?
Yeah, which was actually my feelings about it, which is so funny. That was literally my exact thought. I was like, oh wow, representation, right?
They didn't dumb us down in this movie. Our features down, dull our shit down. It's pretty good. I love that movie. Ooh.
Yeah, it's also such a good movie.
I
Uh,
watched it and I was like, whoa, like I didn't know I needed this in this moment. So it's a damn good movie.
yeah, yeah.
Who's the first person who's the first person that you felt connected to on stage, in book, on a book, in music?
Yeah, I jumped my answer. I think it has to be Ricky.
It has to be Ricky. Okay, okay.
Yeah, I was like trying to think about it. It's one of those things where I love personality. This is not what you asked me, but I love personality questions or quizzes, what
What
are you
area
if you
for
were
you?
this, or what Disney, like whatever. And I like to take them over and over again. And there's this feeling of like not ever feeling satisfied, like not ever really feeling pinpointed. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, so like even thinking about that question, I think I was like, who did I really feel like this is me? And like not necessarily feeling that. But then like I'm really good at associating like other people, which
With
is
other characters.
yeah, yeah. Like I was thinking about that where being like, oh, for me, like Storm was also my mother, and my mother was Storm, and like that's kind of just like what that was in my imagination, and that was like very easy for me. But then if someone was like, which X-Men would you be? I'd be like, wow, existential crisis.
Yeah.
Um, and I think about those things kind of often, right? So yeah. But Ricky is definitely one where I do feel like I was like, there's something about you, and I don't know what it is, and it might be like your queerness at the end of the day, but
So,
yeah.
are there any specific attributes that he has outside of his queerness that you feel connected to?
I mean, he's definitely like light skinned Black Puerto Rican person. I'm not Puerto Rican, but like that's his vibe. Um, his style was really good. He was like very like he's like that like I mean he's like an emotional support for the friend, which like is complicated based on like who he is, but also is like I see myself as that too, and so yeah.
When do you feel most safe?
Um, so I think in my apartment right now, to be honest, I've lived here for like 5 years, um, and I've like been upset or like I've had feelings of insecurity like being out, and the moment I come home I can like shed them away, um which is really nice. I just live with people that I like really appreciate, um and I like know that I can like relax and I can be by myself and like all these like deeply like introverted things that are like important to me. um Yeah. And then even it's like weird because like sometimes I don't like it's not that I don't uh I have those like apocalyptic ending thoughts that are obviously really prevalent right now. And so, sometimes I'm in the shower and I'm just like, and what if something just crashed all over me and this is it? And like you know. But I think that like, most times I feel safe in my apartment. Yeah.
When's the first time you realized you were Black?
Um So this one's weird for me because I feel like I always like knew I was Black.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my second memory of life um is like me waking up on like my uncle's chest when maybe I was like 2 or 3, like in the sunlight, you know, and just being like, this is warm, this is beauty, this is like safety, and that's that's my first memory. It's just like Blackness as safety and beauty and all this kind of stuff. Um, and so like I think for me, because of like how light skinned I am, the relationship then becomes of like when when was like my Blackness put into like question, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is really like what it feels like more for me. Um, and like that I like was trying to remember that because I'm so kind of aware of my position right now. And before yeah, what I mean about being aware is that I'm kind of aware that I get projected on a lot of different identities, like constantly, and that like that is like really ambiguous. So, you know, odds are actually if you asked me like recently, you know, in the last like year or two, if I was like, what am I? That question that gets thrown around, I'd probably say that I was mixed. And I would do that because I know that that's how I was perceived. And that I couldn't just say that I was Black. That if I said I was just Black, that I would then uh, be asked, but like, what else? Or like there would be some kind of modifier to it. And so like I would say that I was mixed just to almost like not deal with that like emotional drain of like having to try to explain myself over and over again. Um and like yeah, and like, you know, the projection that I was talking about before is kind of like it really happens all the time and I like don't know when it's gonna happen. Like there was one time I was with a friend and they were going to the Israeli consulate, which I have complicated feelings about, but I like went with them because we were together. And, you know, I was in the elevator and the woman from the consulate who was helping him said something to me. And it was like, said something about me, like didn't say it to me, said it to my friend, said something about me. And it was kind of so, I like don't remember what it was. Like that's kind of how intense it was. And the only way that I remember that it was like something kind of fucked up was that he like profusely apologized to me in that way where someone's like white uncle said something hella racist. You know what I mean? And it was like in that moment I was Palestinian for that woman, most likely. Like odds are, you know, just based on the context of things.
Onto your Blackness or onto your mixed aesthetic, I guess you could say. Wow.
Yeah, well, like, yeah, it's one of those things that like it just really happens, and I like don't, I never know when it's gonna happen, when I'm going to like shift, right? Like another time is, you know, there's these queer POC only parties that happen like in the Bay, right? Love them, think they're great. I like went with a friend and you know they like said on the flyer like we're gonna ask like, you know, don't be offended if we ask you if you identify as a person of color. We're just trying to make sure that the space is like safe, right? My hair is all long, it's longer than it is now, whatever. Um, and my friend gets asked before me, and it's like, oh, like, do you identify as a person of color? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And then I go, and it's like, do you or have you ever identified as a person of color? And I was like, have I ever? Like, yeah. And it was like, have I ever? Like, what? And it was this moment where I was like, oh, I don't know why I'm not registering for you. I'm just not. I'm just not, you know? Um, and it's like this weird thing where it's like, there's like a series of moments in my life that have kind of reinforced this like ambiguity that really shows like kind of the porousness of race in like a lot of ways. But then it's also like kind of like deeply isolating from like my own sense of like very like this is who I am, you know. Yeah, just like see I'm just like thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, then there's that time and there's that time and there's that time. And I like going back to the question, like I guess this happened to me like, you know, when I was like 4 or 5. My mom told me a story recently, which is why I say I don't really remember, where I guess I was getting bullied, or someone was saying, some kids were saying that I wasn't Black, right? And I was very upset about it because it was like so much of like, you know, in terms of my family, I don't know my father's side of the family at all. So the only side of the family I know is my mother's side, which is my Black side. And so like that's it.
Side is white and your mother's side is Black.
I don't actually know what my dad is, to be honest. Yeah. There's like I have confusions around it where I can't really be sure. But yeah, so I only know my mom's side of the family, which is this variety of Black folk. And so, yeah, so I guess when I was younger, this was happening, and I guess I told the teacher that I was upset and that she should have told the kids that Black comes in like all these different shades, and that like that's what she should have said. I guess that's what I told the teacher. And my mom was, I guess, in the story was like, that was a teachable moment for you. I don't know why you didn't listen to my son. And so like, yeah, I think that like, for me, I like really, I don't struggle with it internally about who I am, but I'm like highly aware of kind of that slippage that happens to me in spaces. Um, yeah, and kind of highly aware of that might not be seen that way. And I just, my rationale for it is that like, I just am gonna be myself. And like, I'm not gonna like affirm, I'm not gonna do things to try to affirm who I am. Like if you can't see who I am based on like my poetry or based on just like who I am as a person in a room, then you're gonna project on me anyway. And like that's just is gonna be what it is. And I'm not gonna do kind of the like labor or the labor around trying to affirm who I am for other people.
And I want to apologize because in your conversation about projecting, I had projected onto you that you're that someone was white and someone was Black, and I like this that assumption. So I apologize, and I also think
Yeah.
with me.
I think yeah, like, but it like makes sense because so much of the way that we like understand things and like what often happens to me is that people want to know because they don't know how to relate to me, or like they don't know how to like experience me. And so it's this really interesting thing, right? Like in the example of me being mistaken for Palestinian for momentarily, right? Like it's like that person made a decision and then I was othered and enemied, right? There's other times where it's like I like want to project on you this thing that like then makes you family, that makes you kin. That's totally happened to me too. Where my uh, sister has a different dad and he's Filipino, and so I grew up with all this kind of Filipino stuff. And so you know I I've like said Filipino dishes in like a certain kind of way that sounds like I'm from the Philippines, I guess, or whatever, and try to explain that it was my stepdad, and I try to do all this stuff. And I went to this Filipino restaurant, and they were, very like, "When are you going back to the Philippines? Why don't you know Tagalog?" And it was this moment of like a projection that was like supposed to be like kind of accepting, but it was still a project. I'm not, no.
And I think it's admirable that you haven't like in this moment you haven't really internalized those projections. Like you're just conscious that it happens.
Yeah, yeah. I think, to be honest, I think there is like a certain level of projections that did happen that I have internalized doing. It's one of the things I'm like trying to do less of. Um, I think it's one of those things where those moments of not being seen for who I am were deeply isolating. And those moments, I think, get misheard under like a feeling of like mulatto tears, right? Or like a narrative of like what we're describing in our isolation is some way trying to describe like uh, an equal footing of like trauma or pain, or like that thing where it's like, well, I'm mixed and like it's really hard and like
experience the same level of trauma because I'm, everyone's confused about who I am, but it's just like it's not the same, but that it exists, like that.
yeah,
it does exist.
yeah. And so I think that like those kinds of feelings make it so that like I sometimes have difficulty saying that unless I like really trust the person or like there's some level of intimacy around it, because it's like I don't want to do, I understand how harmful that is to try to like equate, right? Like an experience and to not acknowledge that there's privilege that comes with like my positionality and my light skinnedness. And I don't want to, and I, since I'm so often misunderstood, I don't want to be misunderstood, right? And so, and so I do actually have these moments of anxiety where I'm just like, in this moment, am I being terribly misunderstood for who I am right now? You know, um, I just think that on the flip side of it, even though some of those things are within me, I also want to move to a place where those aren't, I don't have those things, you know. I want to move to a place that like feels like, you know, I can be really excited to do this thing. Like this thing right here, which is about being Black and queer, and like not be like my experience like isn't valued in the conversation, you know? Um, yeah.
Thank you for that intricate and beautiful answer. I appreciate it. I like how you laugh. You're like, I'm laughing.
Yeah, I was just like, it's a lot of like, you know, deep sitting with that like conundrum, right?
Mm,
You know, that conundrum of like Black elders looking at me and being like, you're family, and then like young folk looking at me and being like, you are not, you know, and like
it's just like
really having to like,
it's just a constant navigation.
yeah, yeah, and like really having to be like, I have no idea, you know,
Mm,
when I'm going to be registered that way and when I'm just like not, you know.
mm.
Um, yeah, yeah. So like that's what it comes. It comes through the years of like reckoning that like yeah,
That's
my life.
I'm gonna jump on to the next one. When's the first time you realized you were queer?
Um, when was the first time I realized it? I feel like I feel like there's a part of me that always like knew,
Mhm.
but like I didn't know what and I didn't know why, and I was like in it like there was like a state of confusion around it because my suspicion was that it wasn't a good thing to be who I am, you
Mm,
know?
mhm.
Like I don't, yeah, like I feel like when I was younger, like, you know, people would be like, oh, you're gay, and my immediate answer would be no, because that was bad, you know, kind
Mm,
of thing.
mm.
Um, but even when I was saying no, it was like, but like maybe, like I don't also know what that means. Like I don't know what I'm signing up for. It sounds like I'm signing up for like more isolation, which doesn't sound fun to me. um, but I like know, like you know, I know I have these moments of definitely like crushes. Like I remember being really young and watching Hook and watching Rufio, who's like the captain of the Lost Boys, and being like, "You're my favorite character," and I like I don't know why. And it's like, oh, I probably know it's because there's something about you that I find charming and magical and whimsical, and I can only imagine myself in alignment with that magicalness, right? Like I can only imagine myself like next to you,
Mm,
in similarity. Um, yeah.
nice. Okay. Um, what would you like to, I'm sorry, what would you like to say to your 12-year-old self?
Oh, this this might. I was like, man, I have all these like complicated answers. Why?
Ah! Because it
So
feels most natural.
well, so there's this weird feeling of like I'm not okay. So there's this weird feeling where my 12-year-old self and like me now, they don't feel so separate and divided that I would say something particular to my 12-year-old self.
Mhm.
You know, like my sense of time, like I just yeah, I feel like so like intermingled or interconnected with that 12-year-old self. Like I acknowledge all the ways that I'm different, but I also acknowledge all the ways in which I couldn't be who I am without my 12-year-old self.
Yeah.
you know? And that means the mistakes I made. That means, you know, my failures. That means my hopes. You know, it means all those things that were so vitally important to me then and messy then.
Mm.
Like I I am still all of that now, you know? And I just can't I really can't imagine saying something to myself then around doing better because I was trying my fucking best.
I- I'm so in
You
this.
know?
Oh man.
Yeah.
Serve
And
young.
it's like it's a, wait, sorry, I think you
Did it cut off?
yeah, a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. That's just an answer I've never heard before. Like, wow, to be that, yeah, it's interconnected. It's like a present living. It's like as if you don't
Yeah.
the timeline. It's just all of it is in this moment.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it is that like different or like a different relationship to time where I'm just like I was yeah, like I am all of those like people at once.
Mhm.
Um
So would you say anything to your 60-year-old self, or is your 60-year-old self now?
yeah. This is kind of my feeling about it. And I don't and I like I wonder so I wonder if it's because like when I was 12, did I really imagine myself being 29 like in terms of like making it to 29. I'm not so sure. I had like the strongest feeling that some way the universe was going to get me by the time I was like 21, 22 was probably it for me, you
Where
know.
did that fear come,
um
that idea come from?
i don't I don't know, like it was just this kind of like I remember being 23 and kind of being like fuck, like you know, I didn't really think I was gonna, I don't think I was really gonna be here, you know, like I just really, yeah. And I don't know if it was just because of like, you know, a sense of like, I grew up in Oakland and I don't know like if it was just because of that sense of like, you know, people just lose their lives like really suddenly here, you know, for like a variety of different reasons or a variety of different contexts. And like I don't feel different or unique enough to like be outside of that system, right? Outside of that machinations that like are about like losing life at like any moment. Like I don't think I'm privileged enough to like be guarded around that. And just kind of like a deep sense of like knowing that like anything could happen at any time. Um, and it wouldn't be anyone's fault. Like it wouldn't be my fault. It wouldn't, you know,
It's just
whatever.
that's the what is.
Yeah, yeah. And so I like part of me thinks that it, you know, it's deeply invested or deeply like part of that, you know, and kind of just a certain relationship with like my emotions that like was difficult.
Mhm.
Um, you know, was cut off to a certain extent. Um, and then another part of me is, you know, now 29, being like, you know, we could make it to 60. I have different feelings about it now. You know, like I'm not, you know. Um, but like, I guess, yeah, I guess it's that presentness where like I'm me and that future self, we're like still here and like we'll see. Like, you know, especially in this moment where it's like so many things are in motion, um and like hope like in our highest dreams are cleansing, right? Like ideologies, like all these kinds of things, like we can really hope for like the like a betterness that like, you know, maybe we're in space in 30 years. I really doubt it. But like, you know, like maybe I could be like on the moon like with like my Prosecco being like, wow, who would have known that 2020 really like switched to this? um, I think that the only thing that I hope for, right, is that I still maintain like my generosity and like the kind of earnestness that I've like always wanted to live my life. And like hopefully I've found more people that appreciate that about me. Like I think that that's it. But I hope for that every day, you know? So
It's like a constant I don't want to say blessing, but a constant wish. And yeah, as long as you're here, that's all you could actually that's like all you could ever really ask for.
yeah.
Thank you for that. Those alternative perspectives. This is like the first time I've heard an answer like yours. People are like, yeah, I would go back and I would say, calm your ass down, or like, it's gonna be all right. And you're just like, no, my 12-year-old self is right here in this moment. And that's like, wow, okay, perspective. I like that.
Yeah. It's actually really true because I've been more irritable, and I was so angry. I was so angry when I was younger, and that anger, like has been coming back. There's been good reasons for it. So,
How do you experience love?
um, how do I? I looked at your questions. This is another hard one for me. Um, I I think so much about it, on some level. Um, I feel like my experience of love for like myself and like other people that I like really, really deeply care about is like unconditional, is like the only way that I can like try to summarize it. Um, I kind of get to this place where like I'll love you and I'll love you like probably forever, and that doesn't mean I have better ways about loving unconditionally, but still having good boundaries. So it doesn't mean that I won't put boundaries up. It doesn't mean that, I will stay in an unhealthy situation. But what it means is that like I like will honor the relationship that we had, grieve for it and let it go, but also still have that love. Um, and it's one of those things where I feel like I realized it kind of recently, like maybe a year ago, where I was like, oh, there's these moments, these people who all I want is their happiness in this way that's like overflowing and embrace and just like deep, deep holding. And that doesn't have to be, but I don't have to be there to hold them. Like, I don't have to be there. I don't have to be the catalyst for their happiness. And somewhere in between that, I feel like is that embrace of like love unconditionally. Um,
When you
on the
say,
flip side, oh, go ahead.
just a quick follow-up question, when you say you don't have to be there to hold them, do you mean like it's their responsibility to understand what that holding means, or there maybe I can't encompass that holding in the way that they need.
Um, I think it's one of those things where I feel like sometimes like love is like understood in this way that like we like are the reason or we're part of the reason for someone else's happiness
Oh,
in
okay.
like some kind of way, right? Like I love you, and that should mean so much to you that like when you're depressed
You
or
should
when you're
be
going
happy.
through it. Wait, what?
That it's like I love you, therefore my love should be enough to sustain you in your happiness.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? There's so many like romantic um there's so many. Wait, I'm like, sorry, your video like cut out. and then all of a sudden you fast forwarded.
Well, fast forward, woos, it's some juju working up in this right now because we talking about love. That's why.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything that you had said. So
I could hear you.
okay, cool. Um, yeah, I think it's like I probably lost my point, or like my train of thought, which is
About
fine.
to say, like loving someone enough. I think where we were at was my question was when you say that you cannot hold someone.
Oh, yeah. So I think that there's a lot of things in media that like kind of support that kind of narrative of like that you need someone like that love should be supportive of someone else's happiness, you
Mhm.
know. Um, and so it like makes sense that like that's where the general like drive for people like in terms of relationships and all these things to like manifest that kind of love.
Mhm.
And it was like, it was just this moment for me and loving somebody else being like, wow, I fucking love you, and like I like you don't need me, like, and
Mhm.
I and I and I and I and it's like I can just be love, I can just be love, right? Like I don't have to like there's not even love for you. I can just be love, and I can just honor that kind of space, which is openness for you in any formation that we like live our life in, right? And so sometimes that means we ain't talking.
Yeah.
and and like in that we ain't talking, like maybe I don't actually have a relationship with this person anymore in like a way that like it's like wow, why do you still hold so much love for them? And it's like because I don't know, because like that's kind of this experience of love that I like want to honor.
Yeah.
That like yeah, like, if we didn't like, even if we ended as messy as we could be, explosive as we can be, if I can look at the times, you know, where we were messy and we needed growth, where we both needed growth, where I needed growth and you needed growth, and I focus on I needed growth, and then I can still be like, I can still be love.
Mhm.
That sounds great. That's how I experience it. I guess being love, I don't know.
No, it makes sense. It's a very mature, almost abstract way of looking at it. But I think you're onto something about this idea of other people being responsible for fulfilling you in a way. And I feel like people who take on like your way of looking at love are constantly combating that. Like why why can't I like I deal with that in being single or like people not understanding that I may or may not, I haven't decided, want kids, or maybe my path isn't to have like a husband or wife, you know? And it's
Yeah.
just, why can't I just be okay? Like, why, and happy? And why, why is the definition of happiness always encompassed with like a coupling or even in like a polyamory or like way of seeing things? Like, there's some people who are just happy on their own, and there's some people who have love and have these connections. It just doesn't look the way you necessarily want it to look. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And like I like know how like kind of, you know, almost ivory tower ish maybe the love like my love explanation like can come off.
Yeah.
Um, but it feels like so I don't like it feels so like essential to dream of like a love that's like doesn't make sense. Like it feels yeah, it feels I don't know. It's I get a lot of flack for it because I think that like I I have like deep patience for a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't have patience for because of it.
Mhm.
Um, but it's also like everyone, I really think that people deserve that kind of generosity and kindness to a point until you need to put your boundaries there, you know?
Okay.
It's like we like yeah, there's like a way that you can like hold space, and then you can be like, okay, I can't hold space for you anymore. But you can, but you like, it's like I want to try to do the hold space first as like an
You
act of,
can't. That should be okay.
yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
I wait, can you repeat it again?
So like if I can, like I want to hold space for you, right? To help you sustain your happiness, to find happiness and sustain it. But if I cannot provide that, that should be okay too, because it's not my responsibility.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just like, it's like this weird, I'm not weird, but it's just like, what does it mean to really like hold someone accountable? What does it really mean to be generous with somebody, you know? And like to really hold someone accountable and to be generous, it, like for me, it has to come from a place of like kind of like love and care, right? And like in love and care, sometimes you acknowledge that like your love and care, like some people like it's just not your responsibility, right? Like it's like weirdly a part of caring for somebody to acknowledge your
Can't give
limitations.
you what it is that you need in this moment.
Yeah, to just acknowledge your limitations.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, because like I think about like times when your best friend is being hard-headed and you've told them every good piece of advice that you can give them, and like it's not like they're not gonna listen.
Yeah.
Like they're just not gonna listen. And there's like something about there's like something about like being in this place of like love that then allows them to like wait for them to listen, you know. But in waiting for them to listen, being like, I can't hear you talk about the situation anymore, right? Like still having good boundaries about stuff, but
Mhm.
like also just being like, I'm gonna love you like that.
That's it. That's called tough love. We're not sure, but tough love.
What's it called? I was like, but I sound so soft.
I'm like, tough love. I have two more questions for you, darling. If you could change your identity, would you? And I'm expanding identity to like, I just want to be a rock on Mars. Like, it could be anything.
Oh, it can be anything?
Anything. You
Oh,
could be
wow.
back in
Wow.
a dinosaur, a queen from the 15th century, anything.
Yeah, okay, that really opens up. Okay, cool. I was like, ooh. Um, you know, okay. Wow, wow, wow. That opening it up a bit, like really just like sends me. Um, I feel if this was about just like experiencing like a certain like moment and like I feel like I want to experience like a tree or yeah, I just want what because they feel like plants, they feel things. We like pretend like they don't, but they do, like what is that experience like what is it, what's the experience to like just grow and like the only thing you worry about is like maybe a fire, like maybe a cold, like
Do you have a specific tree that you would want to be?
um I'm like bad with my trees. I feel like one of those bad poets that like don't know like enough like different whatever, like I'm like I know oak and I know redwood and maybe cedar girl. Like I yeah.
Mm.
But I think I would want to maybe low key be. I experienced there's a street in Berkeley, and I was like walking around not recently, like a few couple months ago, and there was tea trees, and
Wow.
I didn't one. Like sometimes herbs are called things, and you like don't realize that they're actually the thing that they're called. So I didn't realize that a tea tree was actually a tree. I'm just gonna say that. And so I see this tree and it's like a puffy tree with like these like white flowers. It's really pretty. And I was like, oh, like that's like I can be a tree and like an intensely deeply fragrant fragrance for like people. That sounds great.
Okay. I like
Like,
the answer.
yeah.
Mm, mm.
Sorry, I'm like trees. Yeah, like fuck yeah.
I like sequoia. So that's I feel you on that. I've always wanted to be a sequoia tree. So
Yeah.
um, last question. Is there anything that I didn't touch upon that you really want to express in this moment?
Oh, that's really good. Um, I'm trying to I don't know, to be honest. I feel like let me actually sit with myself. I'm sorry. I need to I'm like slightly I just want to take the time to say thank you for this because I really think that this is a beautiful thing and that this is like one of those things that I think is like an act of like love that I just like really want to like appreciate and just say thank you for like very deeply. Um yeah. I've I feel like I was very in the moment. So like, you know, my memory used to be so good and it's still really good. But it's not like disgusting good. And so I feel like I said what needed to be said.
Got you. Thank you for that, and thank you for joining me in this series. It feels good. It feels healing. It feels. I've had some really good um, responses from people. Really, I've cried twice. I was crying all day yesterday because of the responses.
Yeah.
And there's some
Aw.
moments where I'm just like cracking up with people, and it's just like we're shooting the shit. So um, that's kind of the intention of everything. So thank you for joining
Yeah.
me.
Thank you for having me. Oh, it was so nice. And it's so nice to see you because I haven't been able to see you because I'm so introverted. I'm so
I
sorry.
feel it's hard to want to leave the house. Like I left the house for 5 minutes today, and I was like, "Oh, I need to get back in. My lungs hurt. This is
Yeah, yeah, no, the air quality, she's not cute right now.
all right." I'm gonna stop the our interview right here.